Alright, so here we are for the grand finals of the Pop-Lot Super Series here at the Games Den, ending our day of Modern. And in the finals we have Anthony Tran playing Affinity against Will McDonald playing Merfolk.
Wow.
Yeah, so basically we're running back the finals from, not sure which Grand Prix it was, but so in...
the 12-year-old kid on
Yes,
Affinity.
the one with the kid who made it all the way to the finals, but notably he didn't get there. In general, I think it's accepted that Merfolk has a bit of a bad matchup against Affinity, just not really having too many ways to interact with the powerful cards out of Affinity like Cranial Plating, a lot of flyers and things like that.
Affinity does only does most of its damage in the air.
Yeah, definitely.
Pre-board, Affinity's just so heavily favoured.
Yeah.
Post-board, taking a look at Will's list, which we'll have access to shortly, he has 4 Hercules Recalls. That tells you so much about how he feels about that matchup and Fish players in general.
I mean, and that's what we saw in that Grand Prix finals, is the Merfolk player was able to get there off the back of multiple Hercules Recalls coming off the top and just allowing him to continually bounce all of the artifacts from the Affinity side. So we will see.
Will's hand is very straightforward. Double Island, double Spreading Seas, double Lord of Atlantis, and Silvergill Adept. Over for Anthony, we've got... we'll see most of it soon, but Signal Pest, Mox Opal, Glimmer Void, Cranial Plating, Glimmer Void, Mox Opal, Inkmoth Nexus. I mean, either way, it's a very slow hand for Anthony. I think, generally speaking, you don't have a payoff card. You don't really have much that you can be doing. I think this is a mulligan. You don't even have Metalcraft right now.
Yeah, so he drew Steel Overseer off the top, I think. So that's going to give him something that he can develop. And as we sort of highlighted before, Will is pretty short on removal and ways to interact. So it's possible that just sort of one thing could get there. With the multiple Spreading Seas, it is going to answer this Inkmoth being able to be a threat, which will be pretty big. We do see there's a Cranial Plating as well. In Anthony's hand, so yeah, he's just looking for sort of that one threat. It'll be interesting to see if Harbinger of the Tides has a big impact here, because with those Spreading Seas answering the manlands, being able to bounce any of the threats out of the Affinity deck is going to slow it down a lot in this game, just because it's going to be spending mana to equip the Cranial Plating. Each turn, and then none of its threats actually have haste. Okay, so we see...
This is really interesting. As opposed to equipping the Cranial Plating and getting in there for free, he sacrifices the Legend Rule after floating mana the Mox Opals and plays a Steel Overseas. This is going to set him up for a longer game. If Will doesn't have like a Vapor Snag or a Dismember type effect, Anthony's just going to get really ahead there. Will's hand is double.
Yeah. I mean, again, that's sort of a situation where Harbinger of the Tides could be really big. With Steel Overseer sort of tapping each turn, it's possible that he could set up a situation where he bounces it, which just really slows it down a lot. It's just whether this, I believe it's the Signal Pest, right? This promo Signal Pest, is able to sort of get in for some damage here. We're just considering his options, probably considering whether he wants to fire off the Spreading Seas now or whether he just wants to wait. At this point, Spreading Seas isn't 100% necessary, I don't think, because we'd have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 artifacts for the Cranial Plating, plus the 1 power, plus the counter from Steel Overseer, so it wouldn't be lethal by Infect yet. It's very difficult for Anthony to have enough artifacts to sort of make that lethal and still have the mana to activate and equip.
Yeah. I think, that's something I've found ironic about the Affinity deck. Cranial Plating and Arcbound Ravager. One of them is +1 damage, one of them is -1 damage, but apart from that, they don't really work together.
Yeah, they're both sort of just independently incredibly powerful cards. They don't...
It's like having 8 of them.
Yeah. Okay, so we do see an activation on Inkmoth here, so it looks like Anthony is going to go and develop towards this infect kill, which I think is going to be pretty awkward with the way this game actually plays out.
I don't think you can do that. Like, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 points of infect, and that's it.
Yeah, it's sort of that awkward spot where it's a lot of infect, like, you're almost making them dead, but...
It's 9 infect, sorry.
Yeah, you're just not...
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's 9 points of infect.
Yeah.
You should put a counter on that, though. Like...
I mean, I suppose his thinking is this sets him up for just the Ink Moth on its own, with nothing else being lethal for infect.
Yeah.
But yeah, at the same time, I think it's a little awkward. I probably would have opted not to go for that play because he played another Signal Pest just there. He could have set up one
Next
turn
turn.
lethal, right?
Yeah.
With
I think he
next
should have
turn.
waited a turn since it was there. I think he should have just gotten in for small amounts of damage.
Yeah.
But I definitely don't think he should have gotten him to 9. Like the thing is with infect is you have one creature that does that. You have 4 copies of it.
So we do see the Spreading Seas come down just to lock out that potential infect kill. Affinity not really having anything in the main deck to remove that Spreading Seas. So in order to deal more infect damage, he really would have to find another copy of Ink Moth.
That's his only out. He has to find the copy of Ink Moth.
He's not in a terrible position though.
No, well, I mean, he hit for 9 infect. He can do more actual damage. Now that he's going to have a couple of activations from the Overseer. And that's the other thing. If he'd waited a turn, he would have had a second activation from the Overseer. He would have just been in a completely different position. He could have won this game via damage or via infect a turn later. So if that exact same thing had happened, but instead of attacking with Ink Moth, he kind of like attack with Ink Moth, but not kind of gone all in on it. He could have gone, all right, I'll 9 you now, and next turn I'll 11 you. And that would have been lethal. Or he could have just gone all right, I'll deal 8 damage to you now, and next turn I can infect for you for 10.
Yeah,
I think you had so many more options that won't get you to 9 poison counters. Pray you don't have one of the 4 obs.
Yeah, I think... realistically, I think he was probably better positioned, to not take it... Because, the way this has actually played out, he's basically kind of taken a turn off.
Yeah.
He spent his mana, but he spent a decent amount on it doing things that weren't permanent.
Yeah. It's not like he's got enchantment removal that can kind of deal with that Spreading Seas into him kind of going for it. Oh, that's a bit of a blowout.
Okay, so we see Dismember come down and get rid of the Steel Overseer.
That being said, it does put Will down to 15, which
Yep.
I know doesn't sound like much, but with the way that this board is laid out, it's quite a bit.
Yeah, Anthony is capable of doing quite a lot of damage because we do see a Master of Ethereum in his hand as well. So
It's going to be 8 points of damage.
Yeah.
That he can get across just this turn if he attacks with both Signal Pests. Of course, if he does that and Will magically goes, untap 2 Merfolk Masters, that's lethal. It's not always a consideration, but you have to consider that Merfolk can kill you out of nowhere. You can be on 15 and they can have 2 creatures and you can be dead.
Yeah, this is why I think it was probably better positioned to go for the damage on the turn where he went for the infect, and then on the turn after, if you don't get Spreading Seas, you can go for lethal in 1 turn with the Ink Moth, which I can see being completely reasonable. There's only a couple of copies of Dismember in Will's hand. That's the only card that really gets you there. But we saw it sort of go the other way, and now we see Will on 5 health with an opportunity to come back into this game. So we'll just see.
Will doesn't have much on the defense though. He can't block flyers.
Yeah,
he
has.
Can Harbinger things though. Harbinger would be, and the thing is, it's a very awkward position, and I think the fact that Anthony played his turn out like that will depict the outcome of this game. If he loses, it's because of that turn.
There's one of those things within in Affinity where you have to make these decisions multiple turns before it sort of ultimately ends up affecting you. You don't actually kill them until 3 turns later, but 3 turns ago you made the decision I'm going for the infect kill, or I'm going for the damage kill.
But you know, he didn't really need to make that decision. It wasn't that decision wasn't made for him. He could do both. He could commit 2 types of lethal, and if he'd waited a turn, he would have had the ability to switch the cranial plating over at instant speed. I mean,
Yeah,
just,
that's true.
just in case something had happened.
Okay.
I think that
So we see Will considering. Okay, so we see a spreading seas come down. Will get to draw.
Glimmer Voids add 2 types of mana, red and blue.
Okay, so we see a Lord come down, and we see a Curse
Will's
Catcher. Yep, swing in for 6,
A
right?
little bit more. So it gets double pumped. or
7,
single
right?
pumped?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, sure. This does leave Will tapped out, though.
Well, I mean, he has lethal. Anthony has
With
lethal on board.
yeah, with no way to block, so I'm not entirely sure what is happening. Okay, so we see an Arcbound Ravager
Sure.
just for the sake of it, because you know it basically
Just in
ensures
case
that
he
nothing
has
can go
Slaughterhouse.
wrong.
Just in case. To be honest, I would have rather held up like the transfer from cranial plating. Like, why don't you just tap that Inkmoth Nexus? I think if you're BMing your opponent enough to play the Arcbound Ravager, you should do it properly and keep up cranial plating mana. Like, he didn't
Yeah.
need that Ravager.
Yeah, so that was sort of, I think, fairly representative of a lot of the matchups. Quite difficult for Fish. They're just sort of, a little bit slower than Affinity, and there's just not a lot of ways to interact within the main deck.
Ironically, Will has the Mox Opal playmat.
Yeah, that is true. That is very true. Okay, so going to the sideboard, we have Anthony's sideboard here, and from his side he's got 2 Stubborn Denial, 1 Gutshot, 2 Ancient Grudge, 1 Chalice of the Void, 2 Thoughtseize, 2 Ghirapur Aether Grid, 1 Whip Flare, 1 Grafdigger's Cage, 2 Spellskite, and 1 Relic of Progenitus.
So something that I saw him pull to the front was an Ancient Grudge. Would you bring that in if you're Affinity for the Aether Vials? It doesn't even hit Spreading Seas.
Okay, so I could see bringing in like 1, but it's sort of one of those things where, as I was sort of discussing last round, I think that the artifact removal is worse for proactive decks, Affinity being one of the most proactive decks in the format. So I think in general you're not really going to want to spend that 2 mana early in the game to destroy the Aether Vial. It can be really great if it all sort of pans out, but you're kind of going to put yourself a little bit behind. Like, you're sort of saying, like, the game is going to be fair. We're going to trade sort of 1 for 1, because realistically you're not getting the flashback that often.
Sure.
Like in the games where you do get the flashback and you kill 2 Aether Vials, like, that's amazing. But it just doesn't happen that often. But in a deck like Affinity, where you have so few mana sources, you sort of get to like about like 3 mana or something like that, and that's sort of where you stall out, right? I don't know how much you want to spend 2 mana on one of the early turns, and if you're doing it late, then the Aether Vial has probably already done its work. So
I don't think you bring it in.
yeah, I can see arguments for it, but yeah. Other than that, we see Stubborn Denial, which is a potential answer for sideboard hate. So countering something like Hurkyl's Recall. Does sort of have the rider that you need to beat Guy, so it can be a little awkward there. We also see Whip Flare, which is very similar to sort of the other damage-based sweepers that we've seen Will come up against, where it can be excellent or it can be pretty much worthless. So it's sort of going to depend on how many Lords and things he gets out. Affinity not being the kind of deck that has a whole lot of answers, it's not going to sort of kill the Lords and then Whip Flare everything else or anything like that.
Yeah.
It just doesn't have enough answers.
I don't think you bring in Whip Flare either.
And then Yeah, other than that, we just have like a few other cards. I don't think it's realistic to Chalice for 2. So yeah.
You don't really have like the speedy mana to get there.
I think he's just bringing in
Trip,
the answers.
Spirit Guide, Chalice for 2. Go.
he's just bringing the answers to try and stop Hercule's recalls. I think.
On Will's side, 2 Dispel, 2 Tidebinders, 2 Vapor Snakes, 2 Relics, Akira, an Echoing Truth, 4 Hercule's Recall. 4 Hercule's Recall, easy done. Echoing Truth, maybe. I can see bringing Kira in just as like a blocker.
Yeah, I mean, it does have flying. It's a little expensive for that, but at the same time, like, it just gives you a way to interact.
Will is also on the play,
which is
so
like
he does
non-zero.
have that edge.
Yep. I could also see Vapor Snag. It's not the worst. I just don't know how many things you realistically have to bring out, to be honest. I could definitely see Master of Waves being too slow. And Spreading Seas seemed pretty good in that game. So it's probably staying in. And just a cantrip through your deck. Spell Pierce is an interesting one. Same with Dispel. Whether you bring those in to protect your Hercule's recalls against potential counters.
I don't think you bring any counter magic of that sort in. But I think you might keep some of them in.
Yeah, I can see keeping Spell Pierce in. It's cheap enough that it's going to hit things. And it can also hit, other things other than, Stubborn Denial out of your opponent. So yeah, should be interesting. I think a lot of this will come down to the number of Hercule's recalls that get drawn. If we see a similar game to last game, but Will has a Hercule's recall on one of the key turns, it's very easy for him to go from losing to winning, because you saw that basically we went into last turn with both players on 5 life. If there'd been a Hercule's recall on that turn, then it would have completely swung things.
So Will doesn't have a Hercule's Recall in his opening, but he does have an Island, a Mutavault, an Aether Vial, a Master of the Pearl Trident, 2 Mirror Reacheries, and a Vapor Snag. It's going to be enough to make some plays that keep him alive in the early turns, play some threats that are probably not going to be checked until later. And Anthony's hand looks pretty good from what I can see. No, it wasn't.
So he's opted to Mulligan, and then he's opted to Mulligan his 6th there as well. So he'll be going down to 5. That's a bit unfortunate. He will be on the draw this game, so
Affinity is the best deck to Mulligan to 5 with.
Okay, fair enough.
Affinity, like you can be on Affinity either on the play or the draw, preferably the draw, obviously, and you can have a good Mulligan to 5. You can be favored with a Mulligan to 5. If I had to be on, if I had a choice of deck that I had to multiply with, it would be Affinity.
I suppose that's very true, that you just sort of have certain powerhouse cards, and you are able to, on a Mulligan 5, just vomit your hand onto the table.
And that's exactly what he's going to do here.
Yeah.
He's going to go Darksteel Citadel into Vault Scourge, Mox Opal, Hold Up Galblast.
There's a second Vault Scourge on top, which he's scrying. Do you keep a second Vault Scourge, or do you ship that and hope to find like a
I think
Ravager
you're looking for like a plating or something.
Plating, yeah.
I could see keeping it just as a second creature threat.
Sure.
He doesn't know that Will has a Vapor Snag, but I think you bottom that. I think you know what you're looking for and you need some payoff.
Yeah, I think you do need to find one of those payoff cards. We do see Will play a turn 1 Aether Vial here, so that's pretty good for him. And we just see Affinity doing Affinity things.
Drew another Darksteel Citadel. It's going to help him keep that Metalcraft count. And yeah, I think like that Galblast is very rarely going to go face, especially with his hand. And I think it's still going to be a struggle for Anthony to win unless he top decks some payoff, right? Payoff is always what you're looking to hit in Affinity. Most of the time you'll hit your 0 drops to fill your Springleaf Drums. You'll have a Vault Scourge. What you're looking for is like a plating, a master. I think if he untaps and plays a Steel Overseer, it'd be really good.
Yeah, he just needs one of those really powerful...
He needs not a Vault Scourge.
He just needs one of those really powerful 2-drops, basically. We do see Inkmoth, though, which could be relevant in this game.
Kind of weirdly, but also not really. Like, you could have played the Inkmoth Nexus first, since it probably wasn't going to, in your turn, Gal Blast something.
Yeah, it was very unlikely that he was going to end up using that Galv Blast there, so holding up that mana wasn't that relevant. But, yeah. He just opts this turn to use the mana from Mox Opal to pay for the black mana in Scourge, Bolt Scourge's mana cost rather than losing the life.
Yeah, I think if you were planning on doing that, you probably should have played the Inkmoth last turn.
Yeah, that is
Like they're more likely to
very
have
possible.
something on turn 3, and the way that this happens is his Vial takes up to 2, so
Mhm.
he's probably going to play like 2 2-drops, or a 3-drop and a 2-drop, or some variation of that. And I think you definitely wanted the Gal Blast here, if nothing happened last turn.
That is definitely Will's preferred situation here, is to, in this turn sequence, not necessarily at sorcery speed, but to end up with 2 2-drops.
DIY company.
Or, a 2-drop and a 3-drop. More realistically 2 2-drops, and the potential of holding up something like Spell Pierce, Vapor Snag, Mana.
It all depends on whether
So-
he has his third land as well.
Yep.
I'm going to say Aether Vial number 2, I believe.
Yeah, it looks like that's what he's contemplating. Yeah, the second Aether Vial never feels as good as the first.
No.
Especially when it comes down a little later.
And you don't have that land drop.
Yeah, I mean, the land drop would have been nice, potentially allowing him to make an attack with the Mutavault, but not too big. He will need to find that land drop at some point to threaten Hurkyl's Recall, and hopefully draw one, maybe. But
Hopefully not draw one.
yeah.
Like...
Depending on whose perspective, yes. But you can imagine how backbreaking a Hurkyl's Recall right here would be. Bounce 3 of your opponent's lands, 2 of their creatures, and an artifact. Yeah, it's not bad. Yeah.
We have Poison Counterback. It's not quite as cool as Tom Ross's, but it's a start.
We would like to thank the judge staff for this magnificent poison counter.
It's definitely up.
We do see a violin for the Master of the Pearl Trident at end of turn there. And then we see the first Aether Vial tick up to 3, and the second one tick up to 1. So, wondering whether that... Yeah, it looks like there's a Reejerey there, so... yeah, so we're going to get an ever-increasing number of merfolk, I think, at this
Things
point.
are going to happen.
Yes, I think so.
Suspense.
But what we could see is if a Cranial Plating comes up the top for Anthony, then he's going to gain a tremendous amount of life.
Yeah. That's what happens when your creature has lifelink and you get +1/+1 for each artifact you control, and you have 3 Darksteel Citadels. 3. No, there's 1 in his hand.
Oh, I see.
Right there.
Yeah, that's pretty fair. So activating Aether Vial, putting in the Mirror Reejerey. I imagine this is happening at this point because we might be going for... No? Okay. So we're just... Right. I thought he might have been going for like a untap sort of play or something. We do see the Galv Blast getting fired off at this Master of the Pearl Trident.
So I think I'd actually fire at the Mirror Reejerey.
Yeah, realistically, there's not a whole lot of blocking going on in this matchup, so I imagine the
No.
Island Walk's not super relevant, and the tap-untap ability is probably potentially a little better. We do see Steel Overseer come off the top here, though. That's going to be pretty big, unless...
Extra 3. Like, he's chipping away at both parts. If he draws a plating, Will's dead to infect.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. I think this is more realistically how Anthony should have played out last game, is just sort of chipping away and seeing where the weakness comes, whether it is to the infect or the damage kill. But this game, yeah, it looks like the way his hand is played out, it sort of forced him to do that. So we see the first Aether Vial staying on 3, it looks like. Second one going up to 2. So realistically that means that there isn't a Master of Waves in his hand. Plausible that he just doesn't have him in his deck anymore as well. So
They are very slow.
Yeah.
Like, you kind of only want one in your hand where you're like, alright, 4 mana, Master of Voice for 1 million, untap, kill you.
Yeah, you realistically only want it when you're actually casting it sort of exactly.
It's almost like a cripple fight right now.
I mean,
I
kind
hate
of.
to say it, but it's basically a cripple fight.
Yeah, the decks aren't doing exactly what they would like to be doing. We do see the Regery the second Regery get vialed in here, and then we will see Will casting a Lord of Atlantis, and he's indicating his Regery trigger. Untapping both of his lands because of the two Regeries. Wondering whether that means there's another Lord coming down, or whether this is just to represent sort of Hurkyl's Recall, Counterspell mana, sort of things like that.
Hurkyl's Recall would be, wow. Like, just as Anthony's, like, stabilizing from his mulligans.
Yep. We're just contemplating Vapor Snag here, I think.
I think you Vapor Snag the Master, the Steel Overseer 100%.
No, he just activates Mutavault, and he's going for an
damage
attack.
is more important.
Yeah.
I mean, this is like some really cool shenanigans. Like, whenever you can just like tap his creatures before blocks.
Yeah, I don't think that it's not that realistic that Anthony's going to block here.
No, but if you tap his creatures before attacks, sorry.
Yeah, sure.
Like, yeah.
Yes, he Will does have a lot of power plays here with the Regery. That is one of the sort of most powerful things from this Merfolk deck. We do see that Anthony has drawn the Cranial Plating though.
And Will just Vapor Snagged Anthony's Steel Overseer. So it means that he's probably not... He's tapped out. He doesn't have the other...
Yeah, so we see...
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Again, he's doing the 9 thing.
Yep, so he's going for the Infect here. Getting in with the Vault Scourges, more realistically for life gain.
Oh, he just... Oh, that's right, because he had 2 poison counters already.
Yep, so there we go.
Got there.
We have a result.
Affinity takes out back-to-back Modern Popolots.
Yeah, it's a pretty good deck.
I highly recommend it to anyone who's willing to spend a few hours learning how to play it. Well, years, but hours to get started.
Yeah, it is one of those decks that really rewards playing a lot of that same deck. So yeah, thank you for joining us here for the grand finals of Popolot.
It's been a great event. We got 52 or 53 players. It was absolutely amazing having everyone here. We look forward to seeing you in Hornsby next month.